Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here to recap SEC basketball from Tuesday, January the 17th. Blake, let's start in Columbia, Missouri, where Matt Morrell had a really nice night. Ole Miss goes into Columbia and wins 70-58. I don't know how much there is to unpack in this one, but let's have at it.
Yeah, I don't think there's a ton. As we said, these are probably the two bottom teams in the league, and for a team like Ole Miss to win, I mean, it's kind of the same thing we talked about. They've got to have their top guys scoring like top guys, and Morrell goes for 23, and I mean that was going to give them their best chance, to get their first SEC win because, as we talked about, sometimes consistency elsewhere can be hit or miss. But I mean, they had three guys with 8 points, one with 7. McKinnis had 14, so they took advantage of some of the things that we talked about all year long with South Carolina. They're just a team that I think just the Kentucky game was a everything has to go right type of game to win, but against everyone else in the SEC, it's just going to be a challenge, and we saw that again here. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else we say about South Carolina at this point. I mean, they are who they are. Like we mentioned, it was kind of judging them versus the Kentucky game alone versus the previous 15 games, and the next two after that have kind of told us who they are. Team's going to struggle to score. Team that defensively is going to have issues, and that's just a combination that's not going to lead to many wins. And that's just kind of where they are at this point for Ole Miss. As we mentioned, I mean, it's one they had to have because given their schedule, I mean, they could have realistically been looking at 0-8, 0-9, something like that in the league because now they got to go to Arkansas. They got Missouri. They got Kentucky. Even at Vandy now is very challenging. At at Georgia, it's challenging. So, I mean, I don't, I can't say that Ole Miss is probably going to be favored in their next 5 SEC games, but this is one they had to have, and they found a way to get it. And still, I think defensively, they're always going to be right there against a lot of the teams in the SEC, just because, as we said, there's not a lot of great offensive teams, but it's just always the question of does Ole Miss have enough offense to kind of get themselves in position to win those kind of games? And against South Carolina, they did, but I just think against most SEC teams, it's probably going to be a struggle sometimes.
Yeah, two takeaways from that game. For South Carolina, we've talked about how they've got about 4 guys who can really score, and then it drops off a good bit from there. Michi Johnson is the guy that has really come up big when they've played well. Last night he gets 5 points, and I don't know that they're good enough to win without him playing well. Certainly was not last night. And for Ole Miss, Javius McKinnis, I think, had a double-double last night, which he averaged a double-double at Jackson State a year ago. He's taking on, or at least he did last night, a little bigger role, and it seems like he's done that recently. So if you're looking for things with Ole Miss that are developments that might change the trajectory of the season a little bit, that might be one you keep your eye on.
Well, I mean, yeah, you would hope so. I mean, I think that was his only second double-figure scoring game this season. Minutes have been hit or
Yeah.
miss the past month or so. Just kind of looking at the logs here, and so yeah, I mean, I think that's. I mean, obviously, I think anytime you can get a what's he 6'7" ish, kind of a
Yeah, plays
forward,
bigger than the size.
yeah, I was gonna say he kind of plays forward center. He can play kind of in that range. So, and again, he's one of the bigger guys on the team because I mean, this isn't a team that has I think a ton of size, but I mean they're not small either. So, um, yeah, I mean, you just like we said, you got to have more guys that are kind of coming on and being able to help because I mean, otherwise, I just think that it's just going to be hard to do things. I mean, Deshaun Ruffin hasn't played the past 2 games, and he's someone that again maybe can be a little up and down at least this season, just based on probably the competition too. I mean, we said they've not played an easy schedule, but they just they need him back. I think it's safe to say if they're going to win more than a handful of SEC games, if that. But for now, they just need the guys that are in there to step up beyond Matthew Morrell. And yeah, if they can get that from McKinnis and some other guys, they'll give themselves a chance, I think, in their home games. I mean, again, an SEC road win at South Carolina is much different than an SEC road win at an Arkansas or even a Vanderbilt or a Georgia right now, right? So yeah, I think you'll take that one because you needed it, but the rest of them are just going to be a challenge, and it's going to take everybody, I think, to win those.
Moving on, Tennessee goes to Mississippi State. It was a decidedly different kind of game this time around than it was in Knoxville a couple of weeks ago. I think Tennessee ran off 16 or 18 to nothing to start that one in Knoxville with a 37-point blowout or whatever it was that night. Last night, second half was touch and go for a good bit of it. Mississippi State, I think, led in the second half. I listened to this a little bit on radio while I was driving to Vanderbilt in Alabama. It wasn't the prettiest offensive night for Tennessee. What was it? 17 turnovers to 10 assists or something like that. But when the Vols go, what was it? 10 of 24 from 3, 10 to 21, whatever it was, 10 to 24. They're going to be pretty tough to beat because of the defense they can play. And that's what Mississippi State learned last night.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've said. I mean, we said it in the Mississippi State game the first time around. We said it in the South Carolina game. Tennessee hits double-digit threes. Good luck, because they're probably going to beat you. And with the way they play defense, they're probably going to beat you by double digits. Now, this one, was nowhere near the extent of the first one, but played out exactly probably as we would have expected. When it got down to it, Mississippi State needed to find a way to score. Just couldn't do it. And, that was, again, partly Tennessee, I think, just playing good defense. And then again, if they're hitting threes, it was early on. I mean, they were struggling because Tennessee had 10 points with like 5 minutes left in the first half. And you're thinking at that point, this offensive issue is serious, right? But I think to show that they were able to kind of bounce back from that, again, just having a very poor more than first half of the first half, and then to kind of bounce back and find their way from there. I think that was probably the more impressive part for me for Tennessee, just coming off that loss to Kentucky. I mean, they could have just as easily been held to 40 points here, in Starkville, because Mississippi State's the kind of team defensively. I'm not shocked by the turnovers for Tennessee, because I just think that's what you expect against Mississippi State. It's going to happen, especially on the road. But I was just really impressed with the fact that they were able to find their offense and get back on track late in that game, because it was a tight game, down until about the final, 10, 12, 10, 8 minutes, somewhere in there. I mean, it's pretty much a tie game. And Tennessee's able to pull away because they could find the offense. They hit some big shots. Of course, Ziegler with 24, Julian Phillips, we've said all year, getting him involved offensively. I mean, he played, I want to say that was either the most minutes he's played all season or tied for the most minutes. Played 38 minutes. So that, I think, is something else you circle. If he's playing 38 minutes, scoring 18, grabbing 11 rebounds, that's huge. And then I think the even bigger number you circle is 34, because that's how many minutes Josiah Jordan James played. And that's a season high for him as well. So I think that kind of shows you that, especially those two guys, because we've kind of said from the start, those are the two guys I think that you can circle, right? Knowing that in a game like this, I mean, again, let's go back to the start here. I know Tennessee fans are like, well, why haven't they mentioned this yet? I mean, you kind of sometimes just forget to mention this off the start, but yes, like they're playing without Vescovy and Key. And so you have to, and so you have to be able to, have those guys to play those kind of minutes. And obviously it's by necessity, but I think it kind of shows you, though, they can. Like, they're to that point now where Phillips can play that many minutes if he needs to. James maybe is fully back on track to be able to play 34 minutes. And that's where, when you get Vescovy back, when you get Key back, and obviously, you kind of monitor those things to see when those guys are back in. But I mean, that's significant to me, even in a game where you're like, they have to play those minutes. But I think showing the fact that they can play those minutes on the road and play them in very productive fashion, both of those guys. I mean, look, of course, Ziegler plays all 40. I don't think that was a shock in this game. But yeah, I mean, I thought that was the most encouraging part of this. And I think it's a really good road win, even against a Mississippi State team, like we said, that has its challenges offensively. It's still a hard team to play against. Pretty much every, game they played outside of that Tennessee game has been close. And for Tennessee to win that game without two of its better scorers and overall players, I think, on the road. That's a nice win.
Yeah, one note for Mississippi State, Shaquille Moore was excellent last night, got 20 points. We've talked about how they need scoring. Uh, Again, free throws were a problem for State. But for Tennessee, look, we talk a lot about the Vols' flaws because that's what you do when you're a great to perhaps elite team. And it depends on what night you see Tennessee as to what you think the Vols are. But we've talked about the defense. But look, this is a team, Blake, that's 15-3 against a really tough schedule. And last night it did it without two of its better offensive players. And of course, Josiah Jordan-James missed, 10 minutes? This is going to be a team that when it gets to postseason can certainly say it has been tested by adversity.
Yeah, and I don't think we necessarily talk a lot about Tennessee's flaws. I think we talk about Tennessee's flaws when they're presented, which really,
Yeah.
for the most part, has only been
It's only
in
been
2
on one
games this
side.
season. I mean, but it's only been in 2 games basically this season, I think, and that's the Kentucky game and the Colorado game. We talked about the flaw of way back when. Boy, why are they shooting 43s? They can't do that. But then you get to the Kentucky game, and it's like, uh-oh, are these offensive? And that's why I pointed out, the first 15 minutes of this game against Mississippi State, you're thinking, uh-oh, like this is not just a one-time thing against Kentucky. Maybe it's back where they only have 10 points, and you're just wondering, are they going to get to 15 before half? And it's those kind of things start setting in. But the fact that they turned that around and did it without two of their best players and get an 11-point win on the road against a team that was, not long ago was ranked. Whether you think they should have been ranked or not, that's another question, I suppose. But a team that at one point was, doing really good things at 11-0, and so yeah. I mean, I think hats off to Tennessee because it was a nice win, and schedule wise, I mean, schedule sets up pretty nicely for the Vols. I think we talked about that a while back. I don't want to say they have the easy schedule, but they have one of the more manageable schedules, I think, in the SEC, just based on how the games are structured, home and away.
Yeah.
I feel like they're in a pretty good spot. So
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that. You went where I was heading next because Vescovi has aggravated or re-aggravated a shoulder injury. He's a guy that you want to make sure is 100% in March. And here's their schedule. And these are win probabilities according to Ken Pomeroy at LSU. And these are all in order. 84% chance to win. Georgia home, 94% chance. Texas home, 78% chance. Florida away, 72%. Auburn home, 81%. Vanderbilt away, 82%. Missouri home, 89%. Then it's got Alabama and 65%. That might be a little high, but point is that Alabama game is not till February 15th. I'm not saying you need to rest Santiago Vescovi for a month. I don't know what the situation is, but it is at a point where the schedule, compared to what it could be for all the points you just made, this could be an advantageous time to get him some time to mend.
yeah, I mean it's a fine schedule. I mean, really, when you look at it, I mean, it's kind of talking about two teams I think that are on opposite ends and talking about schedules because Tennessee, again, I'm not going to call it easy because it's the SEC and we've already seen what can happen with the transitive property, and all that. But
Yeah.
I think, Mississippi State, on the other hand, may be playing the toughest. They don't have an easy schedule at all, and certainly haven't had an easy schedule at this point playing, the teams they played. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if they're able to kind of turn this around because, I mean, they've got a good group of home games coming up, but it's not an easy schedule the rest of the way.
Okay, Vandy, Alabama. I was in Memorial Gym for that one last night. There's two big storylines, one for each team. Vanderbilt's would be the Liam Robbins injury. We'll get into that a little bit. But first, I think we've got to talk about Brandon Miller, who in his homecoming to his hometown of Nashville was brilliant. 30 points, 10 boards, only needed 16 shots to do it. Made it look easy. This kid, in my mind, and we've said this for a couple of weeks, is the SEC Player of the Year. I thought going into last night, and seeing him in person did nothing to change my mind.
I mean, yeah. What do we say? I mean, we talked about it all year long. I mean, I said he's one of the best SEC freshmen I've ever seen. Nothing's changed. I mean, he's on a different level. than everybody else. And yeah, I mean, he's just one of the best players in the country, the best player, one of the best players in the SEC, because I don't think we should ignore what someone else did in the next game we talk
Yeah.
about. But I mean, top two, he's top two player in the SEC. If you want to put him at one, you can. You want to put him at two, you may get an argument. And I know we're going to have that argument, but they're both really good players. But yeah, I mean, he's got it all. I think when you watch him play, it's very understood that there's just someone like this that is a very special talent and can do things that no one else can. And again, I think he will go down as one of the best freshmen to ever play in the SEC, just based on the talent, the production, and just everything he can do. He was masterful yet again, and I just think it even goes beyond the numbers. It's just this guy he's efficient. Like he makes the most of his opportunities, and when he gets that chance, he takes advantage, and he's able just to score in a very efficient manner. And yeah, I mean, there's so many things to like about him, and that again is the crazy thing is, you know, they've just got so much around him too, and I think that's why Alabama is what Alabama
Yeah.
is. I mean, there's just so much. I mean, Mark Sears scores 3 points. They
Yeah.
win by 12 on the road. It's like, and it's just another. I don't want to say they don't miss a beat, but still, I mean, that's the first time Mark Sears hasn't scored in double figures since the Gonzaga game, but yet they still went on the road by 12. And, I mean, what else? How else do you say it? I mean, they have so many options. And I just think it's gotten to the point where I said before, I think they're the number one team in the country. If you had to ask me right now and make one bet, I'd bet on them to win the national championship because they have the player, they have the depth, they have the system, and they just have everything I think you need to win a national championship and in a tournament setting. And so, I mean, that has not changed. I mean, yeah, they're on another level, I think, than everyone else right now. And there's no reason to change that opinion based on the fact that they just won another road game. And I think the more important point here to remember, and I think this is going to get overlooked because they're just so good offensively, they haven't allowed 70 points in an SEC game yet. And,
Yeah.
you know, that's the difference in Alabama in this year and last year. Not just Brandon Miller, not just the other freshmen, but the difference is they are so much better defensively. They get stops, and that's the difference in why they are as good as they are. Not just the offense. The defense has a lot to do with it too.
Yeah, conference only defense on Ken Palm right now. Alabama in SEC games is the best efficiency defense by about 1.5 over Tennessee. So that's adjusted for schedule. But also we talk about Miller's player of the year. Ken Palm's player of the year race, according to his formula this morning, it goes in this order: Brandon Miller, Colin Castleton, Oscar Tshiebwe, Ricky Council, Tulu Smith. So you may agree or disagree. I probably
would
could
disagree.
pick some different selections, but yeah, that's how he's got it this morning. What's your beef
I
with
mean,
it?
I mean, Oscar Tshiebwe's too.
I wouldn't put Castleton too, but
that's my beef is Oscar Tshiebwe's too. I think, and look, that's not me going back to the old days of not thinking about if Castleton's on that same level. He is, but I would put Tshiebwe too.
We've seen it for too long. Yeah,
I
I think if you've seen those guys play for 2 years, you know who the better player is. But anyway, that's the way his algorithm handicaps it. For Vandy, it was announced before the game, Liam Robbins, Vanderbilt center, and hands down its best player. I mean, he leads them in scoring, rebounding. He's top 5 in the country in blocks. I think he leads them in free throw and field goal percentage. Out 4 to 6 weeks with a sprained ankle. My dog is freaking out about something.
Oreo.
They had Vanderbilt just couldn't get open looks without him. I mean, Tyron Lawrence was kind of their go-to guy. He scored 20 points, but I think it took him 20 shots to get there. Alabama may have not been its best self its last 13 or 14 minutes. They got up 23, and Nato's got a technical foul midway through the second half, maybe trying to light a fire under his team. I don't know what he was doing there. But in any case, Vanderbilt without Liam Robbins is a much different team. It's going to be very interesting to see how this season plays out. They did have a good crowd there last night, although there was a very heavy Alabama presence in that gym. But it was loud. Even the Vanderbilt fans there were loud. But Jerry Stackhouse is not very popular right now with that fan base. There's two ways you can look at the Robbins injury. I think last night you saw what their roster looks like without him, and he won't be back next year. I think he's exhausting his eligibility and probably will play pro ball somewhere for a long time if he can stay healthy, which has been an issue for him. And so I don't know if Vanderbilt is going to use that as a reason and say, hey, that's a couple years in a row. Actually, it's 4 years in a row they've had injuries to key players. But Stackhouse is, I think, 15-42 in SEC games, which generally is not good enough to keep your job anywhere. Vanderbilt's had a much better tradition than that. Again, his popularity rating is not very high. And it's not just the record, it's other things. And I'm going to be very curious as to whether Vanderbilt looks at this as, well, they had their best player out for the key stretch of the season, or are they going to look at this and say, well, this is what the future looks like without Liam Robbins, and it's time to make a change.
Well, I mean, that's a lot to digest. But I mean, the bigger story is, it's how do they win games without him? And I think that's
Yeah.
I mean, and that's kind of what it comes down to, right? It's just because, I mean, look, we play the schedule game. We like doing that. I mean, in all honesty, their next 4 games, I mean, they're probably the underdog in the next 4 games, right? They're at Georgia,
Well,
home
according
against
to Ken
Kentucky.
Palm, they are, yes.
Well, but I think according to everyone, they would be. Probably because when you look at it,
Ken Palm doesn't take Liam Robbins out of the equation. They are underdogs even with him.
well, I would say I'm not even looking at Ken Palm. I'm just looking at their schedule, and like I would assume they're going to be the underdog at Georgia. They're going to be the underdog at home against Kentucky, which that may actually be closer than you would think if Robbins was playing, but he's not. And you take him out of the equation, I think that's much tougher. At A&M, they'll be the underdog. At Alabama, they'll be the underdog. So, not to say they can't win any of those, but I think that's. I mean, look, and they've been the underdog in every game they played in the SEC outside of South Carolina. But I think that again, that room for error when you lose your best player just gets smaller. And if there's anyone that knows that, it's Vanderbilt, because it's happened.
Was it
5
7
years
or 8
running.
years in a row now? At least?
I don't know. Someone said 7 or 8, but I don't know if it's been that long. I know it's been at least 5. That they're either best or second best.
Let's rewind. Let's see. Robbins this year, last year Robbins and Chapman. The year before, Neesmith missed all of league play except for maybe one game. The year before that was Darius Garland. The year before that, Luke Cornett was down for a while. I think the year before that, Matthew Fisher Davis was out for a while. He might have missed 2 years in a row.
Yeah, but
it goes back into Kevin Stallings' tenure. I know that.
I mean, if we're talking about just anybody missing time, yeah. But like if we're just talking about the best player and the second best player, I think it's probably like 5 years. But anyway, you slice it. I mean, you miss key guys, right? So,
right.
Anyway, I mean, you're taking a big element out of the lineup, no matter how many years you go back. So, but I think it's more impactful because it's your best player or second best player, and that's what's happened most the last 5 years, right? So. I think when you look at it from that standpoint, now just kind of knowing where the SEC's gotten to in those 5 years, I think that coincides with it. The league's gotten better. And so you don't have that gap to be able to afford that, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's disappointing because we just said, right? We said, look, they're playing so much better right now. This game against Bama is going to be close just because it's just how it works with Vanderbilt.
That's what they do.
But now it's like you reset a lot of things, and I don't know, man. We'll see. It's like what happens if they finish 5-13 in the league. It's like what happens at that point. I mean, with him out, if Robbins is out for 4 to 6 weeks, that'll be until I mean, at least the Auburn game, which is February 18th.
Yeah.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 9 games. So yeah, I mean that can really swing a season, and I'm on a team already that has had a lot of swings on the season. So
I didn't get to see a minute of what happened in Lexington, but Oscar Tshiebwe pulled a 1960s style box score line, 37 points, 24 minutes. I saw Georgia was up, was it 8 or 10 at the half? And Kentucky just really poured it on in the second half.
yep, that's what happened. I mean that's it. Is Kentucky just they they did something that I think Kentucky. I think all season long, our thought's been that they were going to struggle. They're a bad team to play from behind because I think you worry about their offense, and that's been kind of one of the things we talked about is you just kind of wonder what everything's going to look like. But now, it's a situation where you make the rally they made because I mean, what they had 30, what they have at halftime. I don't know what the score was at halftime. 34, 31, something like that. But they scored 51 points in the second half, I think it was. And look, I mean, Oscar Tshiebwe, it gets to a point, right, where like if he puts up this kind of stat line, no one's going to beat Kentucky because, this is what, everything I think we understand still has to involve him, even if it has to be structured a different way. And, some of the ways they've tried to do it has not worked this season. He's still the guy. But if you can get 17 out of Casey Wallace, if you can get 11 out of Antonio Reeves and Jacob Toppin, then you're starting to turn a bit of a corner, right? And, I mean, CJ Frederick played a lot of minutes, didn't really hit shots, but that's where other people have to step up and hit shots. And we kind of saw that. And I think, Severe Wheeler plays, what do you play? 15 minutes, less
11
than that.
minutes and scores no points.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think, and again, we've talked about this. I mean, I don't know that his role is what John Calipari, initially envisioned it to be. I think that role has changed on this team. And I think we're finally seeing Cal get that. And remember, that's been a big talking point this season. Because they just beat a good Georgia team. And yes, that's a good Georgia team. We keep saying it, and I don't care what the computers say or anything like that. This is a team that is going to win some games, and I think could very well be in position to finish in the top half of the league. Because I just think that they're doing I mean, you could tell when they got up in that game, the way they were playing. Obviously, they're still carried by their main two guys, Roberts and Aquindo, but I like the way this group plays, like just the overall style. They are I don't know, that there's just something about them that I think that they've got a shot, right? And I mean, I just now saw him come on the screen here. But
If you've ever wondered what makes all the noise in our podcast,
my goodness,
this is him.
Well, Oreo coming in for the dog support here. It's a good segue because we talking about the dogs, and Oreo makes his way into the lineup here. But yeah, I mean it's a nice win for Kentucky because, like I said, I think that's a good Georgia team. Not saying they're an elite team, but I think that team's still better than people give them credit for. And for Kentucky to come back and play the way they did in the second half specifically, that is very encouraging because now you've won 2 in a row. Kentucky has built a winning streak, Chris. I know it happened against Louisville and LSU, but I think doing it against Tennessee and Georgia is actually way more impressive than that. And, I just maybe they're starting to turn a corner here. And I know you thought in the first half, hey, maybe not because they're down 11 to Georgia.
Yeah.
But I think if Tshiebwe's not going to score 37 and 24 every game, but still, if they can just get this kind of production out of their main guys, and remember what we said, Cal's starting to limit those minutes, and he's starting to just go with his guys. Toppin, Tshiebwe play 38, Frederick plays 36, Wallace plays 28, Reeves plays 26. I think those are your guys. And then I think it's Wheeler and Livingston, I think, are just going to, I know it's wild to say that maybe, but I think complementary roles is probably the best way to put it because I think, the shooter roles we know are kind of made for Frederick and Reeves. Toppin, I think, has evolved his role into a lot of things. Tshiebwe's role is being the guy. Cason Wallace's role is being almost the guy and can be the guy at times. But I think that's what Cal's figuring out is like he's realizing the rotation that works best, and I think you have to give him credit for that. Like, I know it's not always fun to do that, but given where they were 3 games ago or whatever, 2 games ago to where they are now, you see some things. It's not always going to be pretty with this team, but you see some things. And back-to-back wins. They got A&M coming up next.
Yeah, you have. I feel like you started calling this back in November. Maybe it was December.
Well, if it's good, let's do November.
Right. Well,
you
felt like they were maybe a better team with Cason Wallace running the show.
I mean, I think the numbers support that. I just think he's a different player they're different players. Wallace and Wheeler are different players. I think for what this Kentucky team needs to be, I'm not saying I think Cason Wallace is going to come out and score 20 a game, right? Like his offense will be up and down a little bit. But, we talked about the back issues too recently. But I just think he, for this team, is probably more of what they need because it's kind of been proven that the way they're trying, and I'm not even blaming this on Severe Wheeler, but it's the way they're trying to run their offense seemingly with Wheeler that I think is not beneficial for this particular team. And again, I think that I don't necessarily put that on Wheeler. I think part of that is what we talked about, right? It's just Kentucky's offense, and I don't think he's necessarily set up for success a lot. But maybe I'm sure people will disagree with that. I'm not saying he's. Look, if you had to ask me right now, would I take Cason Wallace or Severe Wheeler? I'd probably take Cason Wallace just because I think that's what this team needs, and you're asking me that question just for this Kentucky team. Yeah, I just think it's a better fit with the pieces around them. And like I said, if it was, I don't know why, I think it's the way Cal sets up how Kentucky runs its offense with Wheeler that just has not worked. And, that's where the tweaks, remember, we always talk about, like, are they going to make the tweaks? Are they going to make the changes? I don't know that they really did that a whole lot with Wheeler to change their offense specifically. But I think if you have Wallace in that role, you almost have to change things because, you kind of understand the dynamic you're working with him. But I don't know. I mean, it's just, I just think it's a better fit with the lineup, and clearly I think it's working a little bit right now. So
before we wrap it up, betting $11 to win 10 stinks. With BROTHROW, you bet 10 to win 10. It lets you bet in all 50 states. Because it's not the house, bettors have a fair chance at winning. It is the only sports betting platform that doesn't take a cut of every bet. No deposits, no minimum bets, no need to connect your bank account. Bettors pay each other directly. There is a hassle-free sign-up process that gets you in the action in seconds. Go to brothrow.com/SE14. Sign up today. Ask to join our private Southeastern 14 group and have some fun with us. Okay, we talked a lot of basketball. We had an Oreo appearance. What do we got coming up next?
Well, you got to hit that subscribe button to find out because we got a lot of stuff coming up next. We'll obviously talk a lot about the games from Wednesday night. We'll have our reaction video for that. We'll start to look ahead to Saturday's games, which I'm going to look real quickly. I haven't taken the first look at Saturday's schedule, but okay. So you've got, we got some top teams going on the road. That's always an interesting setup. Auburn goes to Carolina, Tennessee to LSU, Bama to Missouri. Bama, Missouri could be a fun one. A&M Kentucky
could be a
There's
fun
another
one.
Florida, Mississippi State's interesting for a lot of reasons too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I think kind of a good schedule this weekend, looking at some of those games, and so we'll do that. And of course, live streams. We will. I think the best way to tell you about the live streams is footballs are set, basketballs are just kind of based on what happens. So that's kind of our plan with the basketball live streams. But again, if you hit subscribe, you will know when we're live because it will tell you that we are live. And so that's the best way to do it. We'll have a lot of football stuff on the way, and we're also working on some other stuff as well, to kind of add some more people to the mix and have some fun stuff on the website. We haven't really talked a lot about our website before, but that's, we're kind of starting to expand that a bit. And so, yeah, we got a lot of good stuff in the works for you guys.
We are about that close to 6,000 subscribers, which is about 5,600 more than we had this time a year ago. So if you watch a lot and haven't subscribed, hit that button, get us over that mark, and who knows, maybe by the time you watch this, we'll be there. But that's the next little goal for us. So,
yep, we appreciate all the support.
All right, he's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. We're Southeastern 14, and we will see you again soon.